I was just at your Prime Minister's press conference on Monday, and he started off by saying,
this new era, we call it the era of the nations.
What is the era of the nations?
This is a complete paradigm shift based on hard facts, based on reality. The West lost its confidence. Many countries became less powerful. Different power centers emerged. This new world era requires adaptation.
Viktor Orbán said that Brussels was pro-war. Do you agree with that?
European leaders, they decided not to sign up with Trump's policy. The Americans' intentions are different. They don't want to continue the war as a proxy war between NATO and Russia.
I'm not really sure what Russia are ceding. In no way can Ukraine say they've got any other victory other than there's no more killing.
I consider an agreement is a victory. They are making statements about sending troops. It's escalation.
Why can't we just be honest and say it ends the war, but it's not good for Ukraine?
I think it happened. It's past. It's not the future.
Ukraine have already lost?
Yes.
Okay, it was a Russian victory. Before we get into this interview, I just wanted to say that we have noticed that more than half of our regular viewers are not subscribed. If you want to support the Winston Marshall Show, all you have to do is press subscribe. If you do that, we can have more phenomenal guests exploring the issues you want to hear about that the mainstream media won't touch. But without further ado, on with the interview. Mr. Orbán, thank you so much for taking time to speak with me here in Budapest, especially running up to the next election. I know your time is precious.
Thank you very much for coming to Hungary.
It's a great pleasure. I was just at your Prime Minister's press conference on Monday, and he started off, before taking questions, by saying that 2026 marks the beginning of a new age, the age of the era of the nations and the end of the liberal global order. I wanted to know, as sort of the philosopher king behind him, as you've been called, whether you agree with that and what is the era of the nations?
Well, first of all, my prime minister is, whether somebody likes him or not, he is in politics, in European and international and Hungarian politics for like 35 years. So he is the philosophy king in Hungarian politics. But I try to represent somehow the next generation of patriots as well. And I think the Hungarian national conservative side, everybody agrees that after the collapse of the Soviet Union, there was a world order. It's a description of a neoliberal, globalist, universalist era where the political system, the way of governance, the values, the economic network, they are all universalist ones, and all the same everywhere. And it's understandable because actually United States of America won the Cold War, and everybody was thinking that if you want to be as successful as the United States, you should copy their way of living, and their political system, their social system, their economic system, their model for globalization, and so on and so on. So everybody was in a copying mode. And I think what happened after 30 years, everybody realized that things changed radically. There are different power centers emerged, different civilizational background, different political structure, different economic structure. It's not about what you like and what you dislike. It's about whether something is powerful and successful or not. And the world became completely different. It's more complex, different powerhouses, and the West lost its confidence, lost its power. Many countries became less powerful than before.
Where do you think it lost its confidence?
Europe, mainly European powers.
And this is after the end of the Cold War, not earlier. You don't put this back to the sort of post-war consensus, post-World War II. You actually think this is a much more recent era.
Yes, because no one was seeing any challenges from outside the Western world in the 90s. So, okay, everybody knew that it's a unipolar moment. United States is taking the lead, but the second, third, fourth, fifth countries were all integrated into the Western mindset. Even the Japanese were integrated into that Western mindset. Political structure, globalization structure, social structure, and everybody was copying the way it was done by the winners. And in this situation, the European powers used to be strong. UK, France, Germany, these are the traditional big powers. But now, if you think about the important countries, like we should talk about the Arab world, we should again talk about Russia, we should obviously talk about China, we should talk about India, we should talk about Southeast Asian big countries. Of course, we still talk a lot about United States of America, but there are some other countries at the Middle East front, like Turkey, Israel, and some people still talk about some European power, but some don't. So this is a complete paradigm shift based on hard facts, based on reality.
Right.
So not feelings. And my prime minister was the first one who started to talk about that's not just only a technical issue or something failure in the financial system or like something like the deconjunctura in an economic terms or so on and so on, but it's structural. And this new world era requires adaptation and it requires new strategy from all countries who want to be successful. And you cannot copy anything because if you copy something or somebody, you're going to be stuck. You're not going to be successful. You have to invent your own story and your own strategy. You have to come up with your own strategy. And if you are playing the cards well, you're reading the room well, you understand what's going on and you stick to your own plan, then there is a possibility that you're going to be successful. This is, according to our Hungarian understanding, this is the new word.
Well, certainly Hungary have taken a different position, a unique position. Yeah. It's quite hard to pin you down, actually, as a nation. Certainly geopolitically, it's hard to pin you down. You don't, in some cases, you follow America, let's say recently on Ukraine, which I'd like to come back to, but you take a different position on China, let's say, from America. And is this realpolitik? Is Hungary Is that the game that you play?
Yeah, Hungary has a long history. Our tribes came from the east, couple hundred years ago. They came to the Carpathian Basin. They decided to occupy the land. They converted themselves into Christianity, and they created the state for a unique population, for a unique language, landlocked country, no relatives around the country, just people who are different from us. And our history is a constant battle for survival and sovereignty. That's the Hungarian story in a nutshell. So if you understand this story from that perspective, what we are doing right now, it's not a surprise. You just have to understand who the Hungarians are and where did they come from and where do they live. And if you do know that, then you do understand what are they doing. So our story is that we've been always integrated into the Western structures. We are in the middle of Europe. It's a part of the European civilization. It's decoded in ourselves that we are defenders of Christianity, European Christianity. We were fighting for Ottomans also hundreds of years. But we want to remain sovereign. We didn't want to be destroyed or cancelled or integrated by major empires. And we think that in this situation where we have this special new type of world order, we have to find strategic partnership with every single big country or power center or dominant player. Because in the 20th century, we lost 2 world wars, we lost 2/3 of our territories, we lost 1/3 of our population because there were big players who were against Hungary. And the decision of Trianon, where we lost all of it, was about that there were some major powers who decided that they at least try to destroy Hungary.
Right.
Because it was against their interest, the survival of Hungary. We don't want to repeat that mistake. So we want major countries and big power centers who are interested in the survival and the thrive of Hungary.
So classic thing here, that Hungarians, they really, certainly Hungarian politicians really know their history in a way that in Britain and I think in a lot of the rest of the world, they don't. And we don't have these references back 1,000 years like you have. Now, do you think this memory of Ottoman overlordship, the dual royalty before the Great War, your experiences with the Nazis and then with communists, is this what inspired Fidesz and Viktor Orbán at the beginning to take that sort of opposite stance to the globalists as early as the 90s, so far ahead of what we now seem to be more of a global populist or a global sovereigntist fight back?
Well, what I see is that every generation of Hungarians somehow, in a very different way, under very different circumstances, but learn that survival of yourself and the family somehow related to the survival of the nation, and the survival of the nation, it's always at stake. It's always a question whether it survives or it fails. And it's not like big nations. For example, try to explain to the British that your nation or your country can disappear. That's something which is far, far beyond the imaginable even for an average British citizen. Same for the Germans, same for the Americans. We're talking about 350 million people. How could you disappear? So same for the Indians or the Chinese. But for Hungarians, only 12 million people speaking that kind of language and with this kind of history and geography, it's possible. And so therefore, every generation is learning in schools, in songs, in pop culture, and in every different method that your personal individual freedom and survival and family type of individual and freedom and survival, it's somehow linked to the nation's freedom. Yes. And therefore, you have a historical duty to preserve it, fight for it, and so on and so on. When the Soviets were here in the 80s, and obviously since the Second World War, it was obvious, and that's the reason why the Prime Minister and the Fidesz founding figures, they started as an anti-communist resistant movement. They wanted the Soviets out.
Which is why Soros backed them.
That's the reason why Soros backed them at the beginning. But after the Soviets disappeared, it turned out that Soros wants to take over. And that's the time when Fidesz and my prime minister became anti-Soros. That he was saying that I didn't fight against the communists to give the country to a banker, wants to destroy it and wants to earn money with the currency, with playing tricks with the financial tricks with the currency. So, and I don't want to sell the country to him. So that's when the whole fight started, and Fidesz decided that they are an anti-communist party, a classical liberal party, not progressive liberal, but first and foremost sovereignist party. And their generational goal or mission is to help the survival and of the nation and try to create a century which is a positive century for the Hungarians.
Yeah. So you talk about the survival of the nation there, and you also allude to the fact that you consider yourself Europeans. Now, you've done a great job of preserving your heritage and your culture in a way that we're seeing the rest of Western Europe not struggling because of mass migration. Do you think what's happening in the rest of Europe with regards to this issue? I mean, your Prime Minister, Viktor Orbán, has said Islam is not compatible with the West. He's been quite open about that. We are seeing terrorist attacks happening or being foiled very regularly. We're not seeing an integration miracle or assimilation miracle. On the contrary, we're seeing sort of Balkanization, Lebanonization almost in countries outside of Hungary. Do you think what's happening to the rest of Europe will have a negative impact on Hungary? And do you think, as a European, you have a duty to preserve what's going on in the rest of the continent?
That's a hard question. So Hungarians are hyper realistic, and we are hyper nationalistic compared to the others. So I think that it's not our business to save the world anyhow. That's how we are. That's why we are completely different than all the other colonial powers.
Right.
So I don't want to get involved in others' fight.
Fine.
I don't consider myself as somebody who is capable of deciding or making judgments about other nations or people's conflict. So
to the other question, do you think it will have a negative effect on Hungary?
We just want to save ourselves. So not save the world, but save ourselves. And I think if Western Europe is Islamized, it's
Islamized, yeah.
Islamized. It's captured by radical Islam. That's a danger for my country. So that's the reason why we try to cooperate with all political parties who are against this, what's going on, and we try to find a common ground how to solve the problem of mass migration. But our situation is different than their situation. So for us, we didn't do the same mistake what was done by them. So we just have to preserve the situation where we are now. So to put it so simple, we not allowed to let them in.
Into Hungary or into Europe?
Into Hungary.
Yeah.
But in Western Europe, on that basis, for me, it's very hard to talk to let's do not mention British politicians, but a French or a German politician, because even a patriotic British or French or German politician, his most important problem right now is how to take them out, which is completely different, on how to stabilize the situation, how to integrate them. That's a completely different phenomenon. So for us, still border control is what matters.
Right.
For many politicians in the West, the people are in. So do you have to deal with them or take them out?
You think take that? So wait, deal with them and take them out. So this is interesting because in our country and the rest of other countries in the continent, the conversation now is sort of, the argument is between integration and assimilation, which I think is you'll deal with them, or kick them out, which is the remigration argument now, which is increasingly used, a word which was taboo even 2 or 3 years ago, is now being mainstream, put in mainstream publications and even mainstream parties.
It's still a taboo, sorry to say that, because remigration is the catchy framework of deportation. And no one is there to use the word deportation because it's too much. Everybody is saying remigration.
Oh, so you think remigration is a politically correct term?
But more politically correct than deportation, right?
And you think deportation should be considered?
Taking them out, not letting them in and taking them out.
There's two separate things though, right? So
yes. But these are
migration.
So I think politicians should stop creating a comfortable framework around migration, because average people, everyday grassroots people, they feel that they are betrayed by the elite, and they are looking for politicians who are telling them the truth, using them the proper words, like in a simple way. These are just simple things,
right?
So don't let them in. Take them out. If you start calling migration wave, humanitarian project, even remigration, so on, they have the feeling that you want to hide something. Your intentions are not clear because the language you are using is not clear.
So do you think other nations, do you think Germany should deport
All illegal migrants should be deported
What about
immediately.
legal migrants? What about ones who have been there generations?
That's a very hard question. I'm very happy that it's not me who has to have an answer on that.
Right. Do you think integration and assimilation are feasible or possible? Do you think that's a serious conversation?
Before I became a politician, I used to work in a migration research institution, and I have a kind of background. I was dealing with the issue of migration. I could answer to this question as an expert. And of course, all migration waves are different, and there are different experiences about the integration processes. But one thing is certain. What happened in the last 30 years in actually all of the Western European countries, the impact of those migration flows are all in all negative ones, because they are disintegrated, there are parallel societies, the social tension is rising, and economically the benefits are not there. And there is not enough resource to support the so-called indigenous population and families. So the summary of what happened in the last 30 years in Western Europe, it's negative. So therefore, we Hungarians are pretty much confident that we can say that we are now in general anti-migration, because the migration, what migration means in contemporary Europe, this is something what we don't want.
Well, you've always been that way.
Yeah.
But all you can say now is you don't have the same problems we've got. So you were right about that issue.
And there is one other element. So in a liberal world, there was a liberal world order, but the people, the everyday people, they were not liberal at all in that sense. So not neoliberal, for sure. But the neoliberal elite was making decisions. They were going to elections and trying to get a mandate, but they never asked the mandate to do these things. For example, let people in. So average people in the UK, France, Germany, they never voted in favor of mass migration. No government, doesn't matter whether they were coming from the left side or the right side, were asking the question that, do you want that with all the opportunities and all the risks? Do you want to take that opportunity, or do you consider it as a risk and you don't want to take that?
Actually, they were voting against it. If you actually look at the voting pattern, certainly in Britain, people continually voted against migration.
I mean,
you see Brexit as a vote against mass migration.
Yeah, sure. But like when they were voting in favor of the Conservative Party many times, the Conservative Party
just kept letting more in. Yeah, they did the opposite.
They did something. The opposite. So what is also, I think, a clear sign of this new era, that I think the voters cannot be tricked anymore, and this is how we try to serve them also in Hungary. So if a problem like this comes in, then we immediately launch a referendum, a national consultation, something direct engagement with them, and ask them whether you want this or not. And we asked them immediately after 2015. We organized a national referendum, and it turned out that even those voters who dislike Fidesz, they don't want migration. And they do want politicians who are actually doing something, even if it's controversial, even if it's hard, even if it's hardly criticized. They do want politicians who are not just talking about it, but figuring out something. So, and democratic legitimacy. This is a crucial word. And in this new era, leaders need to have this democratic legitimacy. What is the basic pillar of the society? Why I'm asking the mandate for in the basic fields of social life and economy. Like Trump, why he was elected. He was saying openly he will be against migration and restore law and order on the American streets. Second, economy is going to a bad direction. He will run an economic policy which is in favor of the ordinary American people. full stop. That's the mandate he was asking for, and that's exactly what the government is working on.
Yeah.
And his popularity rate is closely linked to these two very simple promises. I think to 10 and 20 years' time, policy debates and election campaigns were more complicated, like programs for like about 100 pages and, 35 policy areas and so on. Now it's a little bit more simple because people want responsible leaders with the democratic mandate.
Right.
No bullshit, just straightforward.
Yeah. A moment ago, you said that radical Islam was a threat to Hungary. How so?
Well, I think in a Christian society, Hungary is a Christian society. The number of active churchgoers is not high. It's actually relatively low, even compared to some other Central European countries like Poland. There it's higher. But if you ask people whether they identify themselves as part of the Christian culture, their answer, like the overwhelming majority's answer is like, yes, 80, we're talking about 80-90%. So for them, it's important. It's the culture, it's the surrounding, it's the environment. And they want to preserve it. They don't.
So this is a hypothetical threat rather than an actual threat. You don't actually currently see radical Islam.
We don't
You're not
have,
worried about Islamist attacks.
No,
in
no,
Hungary.
we don't have radical. Since we don't have migration, we don't have radical Islamism in Hungary. And if it pops up, we immediately take actions.
Mm-hmm.
So,
right.
Summertime there was an Irish band wanted to come and
Kneecap.
A kneecap play in Hungary. Immediately, the national security services identified them as individuals who are promoting radical Islam. Immediately banned.
Yeah, they on stage they said up Hamas and up Hezbollah back in Britain. I think it was in Britain that they did that.
Yeah, and when like.
But they're not Muslim. They're Irish.
Yeah, but that's a promotion of radical Islamism. So if you promote organizations which are committing terror attacks, it's a part of Hungary. So you can do it freely, but not in Hungary.
Right.
It's so simple. So that kind of preservation of the culture and defense of the nation in that sense, it also requires daily small political actions.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to be cautious because things are changing rapidly, and if you don't focus on that issue in just a couple of years' time, radical Islam and some radical ideologies can brainwash many people.
Yeah.
And then you have a local social movement like Antifa.
Yes.
Other terrorist organization.
Yes.
There's
just an attack in Berlin by Antifa group.
And what they did, they attacked innocent people here in Hungary on the streets.
Oh, you have Antifa problems here in Hungary?
Yeah, and we banned Antifa. But they played a political game. They went back home to Italy and became a European Parliament member. She was elected by the Italian voters to get immunity and escape from the Hungarian prison. Also, we had videotapes that she was beating innocent Hungarian people on the streets. So it's like...
It's a Hungarian national you're talking about.
We are talking about an Italian
She's an Italian. She came here.
She came here. Like tourism. Like terrorist tourism.
Oh, right. So she would have thought Viktor Orbán is another sort of Hitler, and she'd have had that sort of worldview.
Came here and get into confrontation with Hungarian people. So if you don't...
So she's actually a foreign terrorist.
Yes, yes. Yeah. So if you don't take attention to these things, then a couple of years' time, the surrounding changes radically. Yeah. And if it happens, then you cannot turn it back.
Right.
So focus, constant focus.
Sick of the ads? Want to support this show directly? Want bonus content? Well, head to our Substack, where you'll get all of those benefits and more. It's all over at winstonmarshall.co.uk, where you can sign up today. But if you don't use Substack and still want to support us directly here, then check out YouTube membership. With your support, we can continue to grow this show, get on guests that you want to hear about, and explore the sticky issues that the corporate and mainstream media just won't touch. But enough from me, back to the interview. So I've spoken to a few ministers, part of the government, and one theme that comes up again and again and again is the EU. And I get the impression it's like an abusive relationship. Even Viktor Orbán at the press conference on Monday said that Brussels continues to break international law when it comes to Hungary, when I asked him about international law, which is all the other prime ministers and leaders of the world are crying about when it comes to Venezuela. But not only that, there's this sort of animosity. It's quite regularly I hear Hungarians calling Brussels and EU leaders as pro-war when it comes to the Ukraine-Russia war. And generally their ire is directed that way. And I think the Prime Minister was actually asked, why are you still part of this? And his answer is, well, we can't really afford to leave. It was something along those lines. You can't really afford to leave. So it does sound, the EU sort of hate you for everything you represent, but won't leave you because they have the principle of the globalist principle. And you sort of hate them for everything they represent, but can't afford to leave. So it's just like a terrible marriage. And now, obviously, I'm sort of exaggerating things, but do you think that's there's something in that?
I think the central question of that problem is, who do you think represents Europe?
Mm-hmm.
If your answer is Brussels or the Brussels bureaucracy or the institutional power what was put together there, then your description is correct. But what I see is that Europe is us. Europe is about the capitals. Europe is about France and Germany and Italy and Poland and Hungary and all the other countries. And those sovereign countries made the decision to create a platform which should serve as a neutral mediator and a catalyst for their peaceful cooperation.
Mm-hmm.
And something changed, and the Brussels bureaucracy became so-called independent from the will of the nations. It became over-ideologized, and it's a political body,
mm-hmm.
which is using its power with a lot of money, with a lot of regulational tools to force certain policies on certain countries. And this is something wrong. And we are Europe. We want to be part of the European integration. We need the European market. I think all European countries needs that. But we don't want the political union and the political leadership on us,
mm-hmm.
forcing things on the Hungarians.
Which they continue to do. I mean, they're fining you for not taking migrants in.
So therefore, we launched a big program, and it takes a lot of time. We have to kick them out, and we have to overthrow them. We have to find a new leadership in Brussels.
Right. Okay.
And that's what we're working on. So we are the opposition of the Brussels leadership, and our goal is to overthrown them, if I may use that word.
Yes, we tried that for a while in Britain, but we eventually thought, you know what?
But I think we are not, right now the situation is different, and we are not alone. You used to be alone for a long time.
Mm.
But now there is an awakening around Europe. So we have the most popular political party in Italy, in France, in Germany, in Austria, in the Netherlands. So in many big countries, they are actually also identifying themselves as an antithesis of
mm-hmm.
the Brussels elite
mm-hmm.
and the local government, which is a pro-Brazilian elite. So therefore, I'm a little bit more optimistic. And what they are doing is that they are really economically destroying Europe. So more and more people we realize that the next generation of Europeans will have not a better life, but the worst life than the previous generation. And this is a game changer, and this will be a game changer. So I think it's not impossible to break this curve. We were very we understood all the arguments you made about Brexit, but we were very sad that you left, because that fight would be much better and easier with you. But we understand why you did that. You are a big country. You have the luxury to do so. So,
yeah. So back to, which I mentioned in passing, the Ukraine-Russia war.
Actually, everybody who I know from Britain is voted for Brexit. So.
Oh, really?
I don't know the other side.
Oh, you need to meet some loony lefties.
But I don't do that for obvious reasons.
Well, actually, it's unfair. I mean, there are actually some.
No. There are some media people.
There are lots of lefties who did vote to leave. It split both parties, actually. So, but I want to ask about this pro-war thing, because this is another theme when speaking to ministers. Viktor Orbán said that Brussels was pro-war. Do you agree with that?
Of course.
So what's the case
That's
then?
the scariest thing right now.
Explain that case to me, that they are pro-war.
Well, that's a long story about what happened. If we try to put together the pieces. 2022, Russians attack Ukraine. There was a little bit of time of uncertainty when the Ukrainians started negotiation with the Russians. In Istanbul and so on and so on. But then something happened. There was a European Council meeting in Versailles, and the European leaders were saying that this is not our war. Of course, we humanitarian have the Ukrainians, but we are in favor of de-escalation. And then something happened. United States previous leadership made the decision. UK, back at that time, leadership made the decision. And sooner or later, many other European countries made the decision. They turned into a proxy war. And since 2022, it was actually a NATO-Russia proxy war. Russians were fighting directly, and NATO was fighting through the Ukrainians. And what happened? Trump was elected. The Americans were saying that enough is enough. This is a conflict what they don't like to continue. They want to stop it, and we, together with the Prime Minister, we have regular contact with the Ukrainian leadership, with Zelensky and with Putin, so the Russian leadership, and they all have legitimate arguments why they want to continue the fight. Of course, because they all think...
Do you mean legitimate or logical? Or a sort of a logic? Do you think Putin's...
No, mainly logical. I wanted to use the word logical. But what is important is that they both have an argumentation that why they should continue the fight. There is a Russian propaganda which is saying that the Ukrainians are pro-war and the Russians are pro-peace. And there is a Ukrainian propaganda strengthened by Western propaganda, which is saying that the Ukrainians want peace and the Russians want war. And both of them are lying. So I think that the reality, and this is why the peacemaking efforts of Trump is so complicated, President Trump, because both of them has an argumentation why they want to continue the fight. And they need some pressure from outside, from a neutral mediator position, to convince them to change their mind. And what is going on right now? The Americans, since Trump was elected, they are trying to do everything, which really it's a complex diplomatic effort, everything to convince them, both parties, to come back to the tables, to continue what we have and find a diplomatic solution. And what is happening in Europe? We were there at the council meetings. European leaders, they decided not to sign up with Trump's policy.
Okay,
so they decided that they want to continue the same old strategy, which was started in 22. Ukraine has to win, the war has to continue, Russians has to be kicked out, and if it's needed, they are ready to continue the war, and they already decided that if it's needed, they are ready to turn it into a direct European-Russian war.
Mr. Orbán, we'll come back to that latter point, but just you said that there's propaganda, that it's propaganda in Ukraine that Russia want the war and Ukraine want peace. You think that's propaganda? I mean, you do understand that Russia want the war, right? I mean, they waged it. They started the kinetic war. So, in what way is that propaganda?
So, what do you question? Do you question the intention of?
Well, that's strange for me to hear that that's propaganda. That
what? It's
propaganda that Russia want war and Ukraine want peace. You don't think that's true? So, what's not true about that?
Because I think Russia wants war and Ukraine wants war as well. I mean, the leadership of those two countries.
So you think
both sides have the argument what they want to continue, why they want to continue the war.
Right.
Probably their communication is different, but they don't want to make peace. If the Ukrainians are making peace, then the question will pop up. Then why we sacrificed so many lives, why so many people died, why we have so many refugees outside the country, why we lost our financial sovereignty, and actually the Russians are controlling more territory, they gaining more territory than they had before the invasion. And the Russians are saying why we would make peace before we're reaching our goals to neutralize Ukraine. You know what their demands are. So therefore,
but that doesn't sound like it's being pro-war. It's being more by being pro-Ukraine, trying to retain their sovereignty, honor those who have died, and war is the means to achieve that, right?
But same for Russia. So I'm saying that there is a nasty game that all the Westerners and Ukrainians are saying that they want peace, the other side wants war. The Russians are doing the same. They want peace, the other side wants war. Yeah. But in reality, everybody originally is in favor of the continuation of the war because they think that the time is on their side. But the only ones who came into as newcomers are the Americans. The Americans' intentions are different from the previous administration intentions. Mm-hmm. They don't want to continue the war as a proxy war between NATO and Russia. They treat themselves that they declare that actually it's not our war, we didn't start it, we want to end it. They want to operate as a neutral mediators who are putting different kind of pressures based on complex political efforts on both sides to convince them to bring them to the table. And what we have Europe, which is acting only as an agent of one side, the Ukrainians, and actually with all that their efforts are undermining the peace efforts of the Americans and making statements which leads us to the escalatory letter, like sending troops before communicating and before having any kind of agreement with the Russians. Then it's escalation.
So if you're taking the position that the Europeans are siding with the Ukrainians, can you explain to me what about the 28-point plan proposed by Trump, which I think you're sort of alluding to, is not a victory for Russia? Maybe I phrased that question wrong, but it seems to me that it's a Russian victory, that plan proposal.
There is one thing I see. There are why we are talking, people are dying and talking about hundreds of people, thousands of people weekly. They are dying for nothing. They are sacrificing their life for nothing. So I think the victory would be peace. So it requires sacrifice. Of course, peace always requires sacrifice. But that sacrifice, it's worse to take on both sides, and the results would be much better because we stop killing. And now there is killing going on, killing of huge amount of people is going on a daily basis. It's the most tragic
Of course, and
thing.
we agree on that.
So
why then is it hard to say?
From a humanitarian point of view, like really, I consider an agreement is a victory. This is what I consider as a victory, an agreement.
Right.
And we need an agreement between United States, Russia, United States, Ukraine, Russia.
Okay.
We need agreements.
So, but then it should be easy to say, you've achieved the aim. We've got peace. There's no more killing. But to achieve that, let's say with Trump's plan, where Ukraine is ceding basically 20% of their territory, and Russia I'm not really sure what Russia are ceding, and not only Ukraine, that they also have to give up extra territory around Donetsk. This is on Trump's deal. It seems to me that yes, you have the victory of the war's over, but also in no way can Ukraine say they've got any other victory other than there's no more killing.
But probably then the original plan was a failure. So this is what we Hungarians were talking about for like years. Like,
What do you mean by the original plan?
the original plan that the Westerners through the Ukrainians will be able to kick the Russians out and reach regime change in Moscow. Probably that was an illusion, and Ukraine and Europe is now paying a price of that failed strategy, because the strategy is obviously failed. Like everybody was saying, sanctions will get Russia to the knee, and like they will deliberate Moscow. Putin must fail. These are just quotes, statements from famous Western European and American liberal politicians. None of it happened. And what happened, instead of this, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people died on both sides. And Russians are controlling more territory than before. Mm-hmm. So who is on the wrong side and who is on the good side then? So obviously the Hungarian position is like, it's not pro-Russian, it's not pro-Ukrainian, it's pro-Hungarian. And what we see is, from a Hungarian point of view, what we desperately need here in Central Europe is peace, because now it gives us hard time to maintain the economic growth, the stability, the security of the society when we have a war in our neighborhood. And what I see is that conflict, economically, it kills Europe as well. It kills European companies through energy. Inflation hits the middle class, and there is political uncertainty and instability everywhere. So I don't see the point why we should continue to fight like we did in the last 40 years based on a failed strategy. And what's going on with the coalition of the willing? They are making statements about sending troops on the grounds and creating military bases in Ukraine without having any discussion and agreement with the Russians. It's escalation, which we don't need right now. That's the Hungarian.
I'm really interested in the Hungarian point of view on this. Just one thing though. The European, sort of the E3 nations did a counter proposal to Trump's 28-point plan, which doesn't cede quite as much territory, certainly not the Donetsk region, but a lot of the other battle lines as they currently stand. But it's got way more security than Trump's 28-point plan. So it does seem to me that it'd be unfair to say that that proposal hasn't been made by the so-called pro-war European side, because they have actually got a proposal for peace. It's just their proposal, obviously, but Russia have no interest in accepting.
Yeah.
Right.
But if you propose something which will be not accepted by the Russians, then actually your plan is to not accept the plan by the Russians and continue the fight.
Right.
This is why I'm saying that it doesn't matter how they communicate. It does matter what they do. And if they propose something which everybody knows, the Americans knows, that it will be unacceptable for the Russians. And you can say, okay, I propose something. This is the peace plan. It was rejected by the Russians. Let's continue the fight. And where we are at the prolongation of the war. This is the trick we're playing every single week.
I
again
understand
and
that,
again.
but then so why can't we just be honest and say that the Trump plan, peace proposal, it is, I mean, it ends the war, but it's not good for Ukraine. Only that it ends the war, but Ukraine have lost.
Yeah, I think it's already happened. I
Right.
think already lost.
Yeah.
Ukraine already lost.
Yeah. So
I think it happened. It's past. It's not future.
Ukraine have already lost.
Yes.
Okay. So Russia, it was a Russian victory.
Yes.
Yeah. One thing that there's lots of difference of opinion on, and I really want to get the Hungarian point of view on this, is what you perceive Putin's ambitions to have been. And obviously there's quite a gamut from he wants a buffer zone for NATO, he's worried about NATO intrusion, and the other side being he wants territorial conquest. And there's arguments for both sides that we can make. But what's the Hungarian view on that? When you're making your decision making, when you've been analysing this, what have you? And also, your prime minister's been in conversation with Putin, and so might have insight that we don't know. What is your starting position in understanding Moscow's approach to war ambitions?
Well, I think the Russians are many people are saying that the Russians are not rationals. How they communicate and what they're doing. What I think, and I think most of the Hungarians agree with me on that it's the other way around. So they are hyper realistic. They tell exactly what they want and they want to get it. And if they don't get it, they are ready to use power. So what they were saying about Ukraine is that they want Ukraine to remain neutral. And what they realized that the West is starting militarily, security point of view, politically, economically, integrate Ukraine. And they were warning the West many times that it's not acceptable for the West. And actually the West openly said that they don't care. And this is why they decided to launch an attack which is against humanitarian law, and obviously it's a violation of a sovereign country. But there is a reason, and I shouldn't be pro-Russian to understand it. Just listen how the geopolitical thinkers on the American realist side are talking about this. They describe it in a very neutral way, much better than I do. But their description is pretty much the same. What we Hungarians think that we are members of NATO. We are committed to defend the country, and we are committed to our NATO allies. And we think that if we are not escalating things as NATO countries, Russia would never dare to attack a NATO country because NATO is far stronger than Russia. So therefore, we should again pursue for peace and agreement.
Right. Okay. So
between NATO and Russia,
because they were more explicit about the NATO thing, as they were in the ultimatum in December 2021. It was
yes.
So you're taking them for their word rather than the argument that it was more territorial, which is based on the historic sayings of Putin and Russians in the administration, and that they went for Kiev right at the start. They went to invade Kiev. So that there's a sense of territorial, there's kind of, and the fact that they've actually successfully gained a lot of territory within the war. So the Hungarian position has been, it's NATO that Putin is most concerned about, and you're operating off that foundation.
Well, this is what they are communicating. And so honestly, we have a long history with the Russians. They occupied us quite few times. So we have, and it was a bad part of the Hungarian memory. They are our neighbors. We have now peaceful, pragmatic cooperation with them. So we understand them quite well. What we learned since 2010, even when my prime minister was in confrontation with the Russian president, because like the biggest Hungarian oil company was sold by the previous liberal socialist government through the Austrians to the Russians. And my prime minister, when he came back to power, he was saying openly to Putin that he wants to get it back. And they managed it. But they made agreements, and all agreements and promises which were made, the Russians were stick to those agreements. So I think what we can do is like treat them as an empire which has a history and a special, and from us a different socio-cultural and civilizational background, but who are communicating in a transparent way, and try to understand their position from what they are saying,
right,
and take them seriously,
right.
And I think this is the lesson which comes from the United States as well, that they started to take them seriously. And this is how the conversation between the Americans and the Russians are going on right now,
Right.
on that basis, because that's the only basis. So honestly, like all the European politicians who are talking about peace, but they are not ready to communicate with the Russians. How you want to make peace with somebody with whom you don't communicate? So like peace plans, these are just war plans. Like it's an Orwellian language. Like these are just war councils. What we have in Brussels, coalition of willing to go into war, and this is why you have conscriptions in every single country. You are turning many Western European countries turning their countries to war economy, which means higher taxes, austerity measures, and so on and so on. So it's like we are in a path of escalation.
Yes.
And that's a scary thing.
No, I understand that, and of course, ending the killing, it seems like
let's hope
nothing but a great thing. But
let's hope that the Americans will succeed. I think that's the best chance.
Let's hope there will be a
us.
lasting peace.
Yes,
that would be a great thing. There's
I agree with you.
In the ultimatum in 2021, one of the stipulations made by Moscow was that the latest NATO countries, the 1997 NATO countries, which includes Hungary, would not leave NATO, but would have NATO troops and infrastructure removed. Looking back at that, do you wish Hungary had gone along with that ultimatum and removed troops and infrastructure from your land, and in so doing prevented, if you could have persuaded the other NATO countries to do so, prevented the war, if we are to trust Putin, that ultimatum would have been divided?
According to our understanding, and we asked the Russian president personally, the Russians have no problem Hungary being a NATO member.
They didn't ask for Hungary to leave NATO. They just wanted troops and infrastructure out of those latest NATO countries.
That's hypothetical, because negotiations and serious discussions didn't start about that. So I think the NATO should be united. It should be solid. It should be deterrent. It should be capable of defending its own nations and everything which requires that. I think the NATO should remain a defense ally. So that's important. Defense, like protecting the territory of NATO, not getting into like missions outside the territory of NATO. It has nothing to do outside the territory of NATO. If there is a country which has a problem with NATO, identifies it as a risk, then NATO leadership should have negotiations with that country and solve the problem. And in the same time, secure the territory of NATO. It's not impossible. It just requires diplomatic efforts. What we've done is we stopped communicating with them. It stopped communicating not just one time, but like for a longer period of time.
Yeah.
And it was done by the Americans and also done by the Europeans, because after 2014, the French and the Germans, at least they're trying to do an agreement and trying to solve the problem at the diplomatic tables. At least something happened, but now nothing. And that's caused a lot of lives.
It's cost a lot of lives. Mr. Orbán, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Very interesting to get the Hungarian perspective and to understand not just the conflict from your side of things, but also your relationship with the continent. And I appreciate, especially in the run-up to this election you've got now, you taking time to speak with me. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for watching the Winston Marshall Show with our guest, Balázs Orbán. If you want to support the show, remember, all you have to do is press subscribe. And if you head over to winstonmarshall.co.uk, not only will you enjoy ad-free viewing and listening, as well as exclusive content, but you'll also be able to ask future guests your questions. That's all at winstonmarshall.co.uk. But otherwise, until next time, be well.